Husband confessed Alice's child is probably his after a housewarming party incident. I'm left questioning his story and Alice's integrity. My best friend since elementary school, who I'll call Alice, passed away in February from cancer. She had a 2-year-old daughter who went into the custody of her mom after she passed away, who I'll call Alexis. Last month Alexis showed up on our doorstep unannounced, telling my husband he needs to take responsibility for his child and either take custody or start finally paying child support. She says that Alice had told her when her daughter was born who the father was, but didn't want anything to do with him. To answer the inevitable, Alice was a traveling nurse and made a lot of money, which is the only reason I can think of for why she didn't go for child support. During this conversation my husband had the worst panic attack he's ever had, so we had to end the conversation before I could get more details. My husband's story is, I don't even know he said that Alice's daughter is probably his, but that it isn't what I think. Almost 3 years ago we threw a large housewarming party as we just moved into our dream home, after I finally finished residency and was set to make real money for once. Alice was in town, and set to be at the party, but I was called into work before she got there. I didn't get back till after 3 a.m, party was winding down, my husband was passed out upstairs, and Alice had already left the party, which at the time I did find strange as we hadn't seen each other in months. My husband claims he woke up in the middle of the night to Alice on top of him, but he passed out again before he could say anything. He claims he never told me because he was worried I wouldn't believe him, which I don't know if I do. He showed me some texts he sent his best friend the next day asking for his advice about him thinking someone raped him, but if he cheated he could have had that conversation as evidence, especially since he never said Alice specifically. Ever since the party he has been very distant with Alice, and after she had her daughter he would even find excuses not to be around the house when she would visit at all. I don't know if that's because he cheated, or if Alice did actually rape him and this was his trauma response. Honestly Reddit, I don't know what to do. I've known Alice since we were children and she had never come across as that kind of person, but I've also known my husband for over a decade and he's not once ever given the inclination of a cheater. He's an attractive guy and I've seen the looks he gets at the gym and he's never even given more than a glance. What the hell should I do? How do I figure out what the truth is here when Alice isn't even around to defend herself? She never even implied she liked my husband, let alone want to sleep with him. I told my husband he needs to get a DNA test before anything is decided on the child's part, but in the meantime he needs to move out while I think about what I'm going to do here. But mostly lawyer up now. I'm so sorry you're dealing with this. Oop, his reaction screams trauma response to me. Not being believed is a victim's worst nightmare. Update 1. After talking with you, I've come to the realization that my husband is being truthful. My best friend raped him. Several people pointed out that with Alice not liking my husband, if it was an affair, she would have told me when she was dying, if only to separate us. You're absolutely right. I was there, in the room while she passed. I held her hands for days, we talked about so much. If it was just an affair, she would have told me. But if she raped my husband, she wouldn't have said a word. That's the type of thing horrible people take to the grave. I've also come to the realization that I made a terrible mistake asking my husband to leave for a few days while I gather my thoughts. Not to make excuses, but losing my best friend to cancer, a long cancer fight at that, was brutal. To say that I was devastated wouldn't do it justice. That it happened only 6 months ago, I'm still feeling it every day. So to have this thrown on me? It's like I'm losing her all over again. Either she betrayed me, and fucked my husband, or she betrayed me and raped my husband. Not only have I lost her, but now I've lost the good memories, an entire lifetime's worth. It was impossible for me to look at him and not also see her, and be struck with the horror and realization of that loss all over again. I felt I needed to be able to break down, grieve, and think without the fresh wave of loss I got every time I saw him. It was wrong of me to ask him to leave, you're right though, and as of a few minutes ago I've righted this wrong. I called my husband, I apologized, told him I believe him, and begged him to come home. He'll be here in half an hour at most, and I'm going to support my husband the way I know he would have supported me. I've been an off and on Reddit user for several years, and sometimes the advice given on subreddits like these can be a bit hit or miss. But today you guys did good. You've helped me realize not only that I was wrong, and being stupid at that, but that I was hurting the person that needed me the most. I was selfish. I have no idea what we're going to do as far as the potential daughter is concerned, but I can assure you we'll deal with it together. It's going to take a lot of time, and probably a lot of therapy, to grieve this new loss. I feel numb now, as though I'll never cry again. My best friend raped my husband, which means she was no friend of mine. She flaunted it, coming to my house, sitting with me, and gabbing. She brought her child here, trying to rub it in his face, right in front of me. She tortured the man I loved, and I was an unknowing party to it. I feel sick to my stomach over how many times she came over, just to hold it over him. I'm honestly at a loss on how to make that up to him. Update 2. As you can imagine, after the clusterfuck that was thrust upon us, this update isn't likely to answer any of your questions, only present a few more. I want to start by telling you all that I love, and trust my husband. My reaction to ask him for space to think, in retrospect, was wrong. But at the time I didn't know what to think. It was a combination of losing my best friend again, and also the fear that I was losing my husband, that sent me spiraling. Again, It was a mistake to ask him to leave, and I did rectify that in the end. Now, for the update. As mentioned in the original post, I did take a leave of absence from work and we spent a long time just being together. Talking, reaffirming our love for one another, and figuring out what to do next. We of course spoke with a lawyer, and my husband was very adamant about not having anything to do with the child, but was willing to offer financial support as needed. So we agreed to do a DNA test immediately to prove paternity, and then go from there. Didn't know you could buy tests on Amazon, but with only a few weeks processing it was the easiest path forward since Alexis lives hours away. To everyone's surprise, Alice's daughter is not my husband. We ended up testing twice, both very, very definitive. The first test we performed ourselves as mentioned, and another after Alexis refused to believe the first test, and took my husband to court for child support. For a single second this whole thing made me second guess if my husband was raped, that this could have been her way of forcing my husband to admit to an affair. But after talking with Alexis, I don't think that was the plan. Alexis says that Alice told her my husband was the father under strict confidence, demanding that she never, ever tell me or my husband. We were only ever to be told if Alexis died before Alice's daughter was old enough to take care of herself, so that she wouldn't end up in foster care. The only reason Alexis came to us then, instead of keeping that secret, is because Alice's life insurance wasn't being released yet, and she was out of options. She also felt I should know my husband and her daughter had had an affair. This all reaffirms in my mind that Alice did rape my husband, with the expectation of getting pregnant with his child. She obviously had other partners at the time, since one of them fathered her daughter, but no one knows who. It's clear to me that Alice believed it was my husband. I did suggest Alexis upload a sample to Ancestry, see if any matches pop up, but as Alice traveled all over for work, I don't know that anything will ever come of that. In truth, I've washed my hands of the situation. Alice did enough damage, and I don't particularly plan to be around for any more. My husband and I have gone through a lot of counseling, and will likely continue for a while. This whole situation damaged us both, my husband more obviously, and I don't think we'll fully heal for a very long while. To answer a few questions, no, sadly there isn't a hidden diary, or text to explain what the fuck was going on. My husband and I are not getting divorced. He understands why I reacted the way I did, and has been strong when I was weak before. I've spent the past 7 months being strong while he was weak, so we're considering the whole thing even. We are still madly in love, and plan to be together for a long time. Still more on this. No, we will not be adopting Alice's child. If she had been my husband's, we would not have been adopting the child. Ultimately I thank Reddit for setting me straight. There was a massive outpouring of support, and corrective advice. To say I got a slap in the face would be a descriptive but apt way to put it. I needed it then, and I thank you for it. To say that you may have saved my marriage is an understatement. I do, however, have some good news. During my leave of absence, while my husband and I rediscovered what makes us love each other the most, I got pregnant. We're expecting our first baby, a girl, in a little over 3 months, and my husband and I are ecstatic. And no, we will not be naming her after my dead ex-best friend. Update 3. I don't even know where to begin with this update. I thought the worst was behind us, but apparently life had other plans. Our daughter was born 3 weeks ago, healthy, beautiful, and perfect in every way. For a brief moment, everything felt like it was falling into place again. My husband was incredible during the birth, and seeing him hold our daughter for the first time almost made me forget about everything we'd been through. But then Alexis showed up at the hospital. I was still recovering from a difficult labor when she walked into my room, holding a manila envelope. She looked terrible, like she hadn't slept in weeks. She said she'd been going through Alice's things more thoroughly, preparing to sell her house, when she found something hidden in a locked box in Alice's closet. Inside the envelope were photos. Dozens of them. Pictures of my husband from the night of our housewarming party, but also from other times, at the grocery store, at his work, at the gym. Some were clearly taken from inside our house through windows. There were also photos of me, but with my face scratched out in red ink. At the bottom of the box was a journal, and Alexis had read enough to know I needed to see it. The journal entries started almost 2 years before the party. Alice had been obsessed with my husband for much longer than I ever realized. She wrote about how she deserved him more than I did, how she was prettier, more successful, more exciting. She detailed plans to get him away from her, meaning me. The night of the party wasn't random, she had planned it all out. She wrote about how she was going to get pregnant with his child and then tell me about their affair after the baby was born, knowing it would destroy our marriage. But the most disturbing part was what she wrote after that night. She was furious that my husband had been unresponsive and that she couldn't tell if her plan had worked. She wrote about how she tried to corner him alone several times after that, but he always avoided her. When she found out she was pregnant, she was initially thrilled, thinking it had to be his. But as the pregnancy progressed and she started having doubts, she began sleeping with other men, hoping to confuse the paternity. The final entries were from right before she died. She admitted she wasn't sure who the father was, but she was going to let Alexis believe it was my husband anyway. She wrote that even if the child wasn't his, the accusation alone would probably be enough to destroy our marriage, and she'd finally get her revenge for me stealing him from her. My husband hasn't spoken since Alexis showed us everything. He's been holding our daughter almost constantly, like he's afraid to let her go. I think seeing the full extent of Alice's obsession has broken something in him. He keeps apologizing to me, saying he should have seen the signs, should have protected me from her. I'm terrified about what this means for us. Alice managed to hurt us even from her grave, and now I'm second-guessing every memory I have of our friendship. Was she always this twisted? How did I never notice? She was at my wedding, she helped me through medical school, she was supposed to be my maid of honor before she got sick. Was it all fake? The worst part is that I keep thinking about all the times she came over after the party, especially when she was pregnant. She would sit there, rubbing her belly, talking about how excited she was to be a mother. My husband would always find excuses to leave the room, and I thought he was just being weird about pregnant women. Now I realize she was taunting him, and I was completely oblivious. Alexis has been a wreck too. She said she always thought Alice was a little odd, but she never imagined this level of manipulation. She's been Alice's daughter's primary caregiver for months now, and she's struggling with how to explain any of this when the little girl gets older. She also found evidence that Alice had been lying about her finances. She actually had very little money left when she died, which is why she was so desperate to pin the paternity on my husband. I don't know what to do next. Part of me wants to pack up and move somewhere Alice never existed in our lives. But we just bought this house, and my husband loves his job, and I can't let her win by forcing us to run. At the same time, I'm having panic attacks every time someone knocks on our door, wondering what else Alice might have planned that we don't know about yet. Our therapist says this is going to take time to process, but I don't know if time is enough. How do you recover from finding out your best friend was actually your stalker? How do you trust your judgment about people ever again? And how do I help my husband heal from something that was so much worse than we ever imagined? I'm holding my daughter right now as I type this, and she's perfect and innocent and has no idea what kind of person her Aunt Alice really was. I'm grateful she'll never have to know her, but I'm also terrified about what other secrets might still be out there, waiting to destroy what's left of our peace. Update 4. I wish I could say things have gotten better, but I'm sitting here at 3 a.m., my 6-week-old daughter finally asleep, and I feel like I'm losing my mind. I thought finding Alice's journal would be the end of it, but it was just the beginning of a nightmare I never saw coming. Last week, my husband went back to work for the first time since our daughter was born. He seemed ready, we'd been doing better, he was bonding with the baby, and our therapist thought returning to normal routines would help. But on his third day back, he came home completely shattered. Apparently, Alice had contacted his coworkers too. His boss pulled him aside and asked if there was something he needed to discuss about his relationship with Alice. Turns out, she had called his office multiple times over the past 2 years, claiming to be his girlfriend and asking about his schedule. She told his secretary she was planning a surprise visit and needed to know when he'd be free. She even sent flowers to his office once with a card that said "missing you" and signed it with just an A. My husband had no idea. His secretary had mentioned the flowers briefly, but he assumed they were from a grateful client. He's an accountant, and it's tax season. The calls were always when he was with clients, so he never knew they happened. His coworkers had been giving him weird looks for months, thinking he was having an affair. But that's not even the worst part. When he got home that day, there was a package on our doorstep. No return address, just our names. Inside were copies of Alice's medical records. Apparently she'd been seeing a psychiatrist for the past 3 years and had been prescribed antipsychotic medication that she wasn't taking. There was also a letter, but not from Alice. It was from someone named David, claiming to be Alice's ex-boyfriend from nursing school. David wrote that he'd been trying to find Alice for months because she'd been stalking him too. He said she'd done this before, become obsessed with men who were in relationships and try to destroy their lives. He'd finally tracked down her address through mutual friends, only to discover she'd died. He'd been going through court records and found our names in connection with the paternity case, so he decided to reach out. According to David, Alice had been expelled from nursing school for stalking a married professor. She'd broken into his office, stolen personal items, and even showed up at his house claiming to be pregnant with his child. She wasn't. The school covered it up to avoid scandal, but David said everyone knew. He'd dated Alice briefly before this happened, and she'd started exhibiting the same behaviors with him, following him, taking pictures, going through his things. I called the nursing school to verify David's story, and while they couldn't give me details, they confirmed that Alice had been asked to leave and had to finish her degree elsewhere. Everything was starting to make sense: why Alice moved around so much as a traveling nurse, why she never seemed to have long-term relationships, why she was always so interested in my life and my husband. But here's where it gets really bad. David also sent us copies of text messages Alice had sent him over the years. In them, she talked about me, by name. She'd been telling David about her best friend who had stolen the man she was meant to be with. She described our wedding, our house, even our vacation plans. She'd been feeding him information about our lives for years, painting me as this terrible person who didn't deserve my husband. My husband read those messages and had what I can only describe as a complete breakdown. He started questioning everything, wondering if other people in our lives were actually Alice's allies, if she'd manipulated other situations we didn't know about. He's become paranoid and suspicious in a way I've never seen before. He barely sleeps, he checks all the locks multiple times at night, and he started questioning whether people at work are acting strange around him. Yesterday, He asked me if I thought there was a chance Alice had ever drugged him before the party. The question came out of nowhere. We were just having breakfast when he suddenly asked if I remembered him being unusually tired after other social events Alice attended. The more I thought about it, the more I realized there were several times he'd seemed off after she'd been around. Times when he'd fall asleep early or seem confused about conversations he'd had. I don't know what to think anymore. Was Alice drugging my husband at other times? Was the rape at the party just the culmination of months or years of abuse? The thought makes me physically sick, but it would explain so much about his behavior around her. The worst part is that I'm starting to doubt my own memories. I keep going back through old photos, old conversations, looking for signs I missed. There's one picture from my birthday 2 years ago where Alice is standing behind my husband with her hand on his shoulder, and he looks incredibly uncomfortable. At the time, I thought he was just tired, but now I see something else in his expression. Fear, maybe? Or resignation? I found Alice's phone number in my contacts and realized she'd been texting me updates about her location, telling me when she was in town, when she was leaving, when she'd be back. I always thought she was just being a good friend, keeping in touch. Now I realize she was probably coordinating her stalking with my schedule, making sure she knew when I'd be at work and when my husband would be alone. Our daughter is the only thing keeping me sane right now. When I hold her, I can forget about Alice for a few minutes. But then I remember that Alice wanted to destroy this, wanted to make sure my husband and I never had a family together. The thought of her planning to ruin our lives while sitting in our living room, holding our hands, pretending to care about us. It's too much. My husband has been talking about moving. He says he can't stand being in the house where Alice violated him, where she took pictures of him, where she planned our destruction. Part of me agrees, maybe a fresh start would help. But another part of me is angry that she's still controlling our lives, still making us afraid in our own home. I called the police about the photos in the journal, but they said since Alice is dead, there's nothing they can do. They suggested we get a restraining order against anyone else who might be connected to her, but David seems genuinely horrified by what she did. He's actually been helpful, sharing what he knows about her patterns and behaviors. I'm scheduled to go back to work in a few weeks, and I'm terrified. What if Alice contacted people at my hospital too? What if she spread lies about me to my colleagues? What if there are more surprises waiting for us? I feel like I'm walking through a minefield, never knowing when the next explosion will come. My husband keeps apologizing, saying he should have told me about feeling uncomfortable around Alice, should have trusted his instincts. But how could he have known? Alice was supposed to be my friend. I was the one who invited her into our lives, who trusted her with our secrets, who let her get close enough to hurt us. I don't know how to move forward from this. Every day feels like we're discovering something new about Alice's manipulation, some new way she invaded our privacy or tried to destroy our relationship. I'm starting to wonder if we'll ever feel safe again, if we'll ever be able to trust anyone again. The baby is crying now. Time to pretend everything is normal for a few more hours. Update 5. I almost didn't post this, not after so much ugliness. But you all have been a lifeline for me, through the waves of horror. I owe it to myself, and strangely, to Alice's daughter, to finish what I started. Here's what happened over the past 2 weeks. First, the locks. Not just literal ones, digital ones too. We installed a new security system with cameras, movement sensors, the works, because my husband's paranoia had gone through the roof. I hired a tech-savvy colleague from the hospital, I'm a doctor, if you've forgotten all this chaos, to sweep all our devices. And that's when we found it, a cloud storage account, linked to an email address I didn't recognize, with hundreds of photos and notes. Turns out Alice had used old, shared passwords from when we studied together. She'd set up remote access years ago, likely the first time she house sat for us. The account contained photos of us sleeping, including one of my husband splayed on the guest bed that made me sick, lists of our friends' names, even a spreadsheet mapping when I was scheduled for night shifts during residency, and which nights my husband was home alone. I froze and wanted to vomit. She documented everything. Not just us, dozens of folders about other men, some clearly from her traveling nurse gigs. Her paranoia and obsession felt even deeper. She wasn't just stalking us, we were one sick branch of a decaying tree. The police came and took copies, but again, Alice was dead. We can't prosecute a ghost. But they did take it seriously. Finally, a detective visited Alexis and put a flag on Alice's estate in case any other claims or evidence turned up. They offered us a contact at the department's victim support service. That made me sob with something close to relief. But that wasn't the end. The biggest shock arrived when Alexis called, frantic, Alice's will, which had never finished probate, named not Alexis, not any family member, but me as the alternate guardian for her daughter if Alexis was ever incapacitated. Alexis was in tears and begged me, not angrily, not demanding, but honest desperation, never to let that happen. Apparently, Alice had, in her narcissistic way, assumed I'd never turn my back on her legacy and would raise her child as my own. The language in the will was chilling. In the event Alexis is unable, my dearest friend, me, is the only one who can keep my daughter surrounded by excellence and love. What excellence? What love? Soon after, a social worker reached out on behalf of the court to confirm I was aware of being named as alternate guardian. I wanted to scream. I clarified, Absolutely not, under any circumstances. I am not a suitable guardian. It felt cruel. Alice's daughter deserves a life free of my nightmares. I finally sat down with Alexis for coffee, the kind where you keep your coats on and barely touch your mugs. She wanted to talk about Alice's daughter. We both started crying, not for Alice, but for everything that was stolen from us. Peace, childhoods, even the hope of friendship. She confessed she was starting to break under the pressure. She'd applied for counseling and had started looking for Alice's daughter's biological father for closure, maybe medical history, maybe just the truth. She even asked if I'd be a reference, not guardian, just someone who could vouch for her as a parent, a weird reversal given all the drama. I agreed. It was the first moment in months where I saw a path forward built on honesty, not secrets. Meanwhile, my husband began therapy with a trauma-informed specialist the detective recommended. For the first time, he was able to use the word rape out loud. Not in a whisper, but a statement. He's been working hard to let go of the guilt about letting it happen, which is such a poisonous story we tell survivors. It's still raw, but he started going back to the gym, started seeing friends again, and yesterday, for the first time, he took our daughter for a walk around the block alone, without texting me panicked updates every 5 minutes. As for me, I went back to work last week. I was terrified, waiting for sideways glances or rumors. But instead, my supervisor quietly pulled me aside. Apparently, Alice had reported me for unethical conduct right before she died, but the complaint was so vague and unsupported, it never went anywhere. HR filed it, unopened, as an anonymous tip. My supervisor told me she'd never believed a word of it. It was a strange comfort to realize I wasn't the only one Alice tried to poison. She was thorough, but not as clever as she thought, not where it mattered most, in the places where people truly knew us. We put the house up for sale. It breaks my heart. It's a beautiful home, everything we wanted, but there are too many shadows, and the thought of explaining the guest room to my daughter when she's older is crushing. An offer came in, above asking, from a young couple with a new baby. They seem joyful, excited. I hope this house is good to them. It deserves to be a home, not a haunted ruin. We found a smaller house in an older, safer neighborhood, closer to both my husband's office and the hospital. No guest rooms. No hidden photo ops. We're slowly packing, taking only what brings us good memories. I gave away most of the dishes Alice ever touched. One small, bright surprise, at a support group for new moms, I met someone who'd also overcome a serious betrayal by a friend. We bonded over late-night calls and ugly laughter. I never thought I could trust another woman the same way again, but she's proof that healing isn't about erasing the past, it's about building something new, even if every board bears the marks of the fire. Tonight, my husband and I sat in the nursery, watching our daughter sleep. He said, I don't think she'll ever know the whole truth, but I want her to grow up knowing that monsters are real, and that you can survive them. There are still hard days, still moments I flinch when my phone rings or startle at a knock. But today, we're not living backwards anymore. There's still fear, but there's hope, too. Alexis is getting help. Alice's daughter will grow up far from her mother's twisted plans. And as for us, we're moving forward, together. Not unscarred, but unbroken. I don't know if this is the ending, but for the first time, I feel like we're writing the story ourselves.